Welcome back to another episode of FCS Delivered. This is our third of 4 before the start of the season, but those games are fast approaching. I'm Craig Haley, along with co-host Gary Reasons, who's back in the home office after visiting with the New York Giants last week. Gary, how you doing this week?
Well, I had a great week last week, Craig, and good to get back in the FCS swing here and talk about what's going on in the FCS and looking forward to the season.
It's certainly fast approaching, Gary, that's for sure. As you know, for FCS Delivered, our producers are Seth Biley and Graham Bell. You can find us so many places. If you're listening via podcast, there's Amazon, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher. And of course, you might be watching us on TheAnalyst.com, on our YouTube channel, just search FCS Delivered. And this year, Urban Edge Network's HBCU+. Gary, this time of the year is terrific. We're all looking forward to the season. And one of the things we can do is also concentrate on individuals, and that includes the NFL Draft 2025, the prospects from the FCS level. This week we'll talk that, and we'll also have a guest, Emory Hunt from Football Game Plan and CBS HQ. Gary, I know this is one of your favorite topics. I mean, last year we had this past draft, 12 FCS players were selected. Karan Amaghetto from Yale was the first player selected third round to the Chicago Bears. What did you think of FCS in the draft this year and just where they stand overall?
You know, it's always one of those challenging things when you talk about FCS players being drafted in the National Football League. I still think that the NFL as a whole look at the FCS and they somewhat downgrade the ability of the players. And that's just natural because the FBS is the largest Division I college football category. But Division I FCS football is just – those guys can be just as talented as we found many, many times. You know, myself included, I had an opportunity to play at the FCS level, and I wound up having a very excellent career in the National Football League. So you can find guys that are playing at the FCS level, and I think there's a lot of talent there still, Craig, and it's going to come from anywhere. And you really never know until you kind of kick the tires on every university and figure out just what the talent level is at those schools and what players might be a good fit for your football club.
Flash a certain ability at the combine or a pro day, and that really stands out to scouts. But we're also seeing that the FCS is losing players earlier to the FBS with the whole NCAA transfer portal. How much of an impact is that having on the FCS and its NFL draft candidates?
It's having a huge effect on teams, Craig, and you're kind of a double-edged sword. You're wanting players to excel and really do better on the field at the FCS level, but when you have the transfer portal there, successful players, whether you're a first-team all-conference selection or you're one of our national award winners as a younger player, there may be an opportunity for you to go into that transfer portal and move to an FBS level program to kind of rise your stock, so to speak, if you're looking at a potential NFL career. So there's some dynamics in there that aren't necessarily great for FCS football teams, but coaches are trying to navigate these waters, and there's still a lot of things that are moving parts in this whole discussion.
Well, one thing that happened this past year with the draft, an FCS quarterback was not selected. It was the second straight time. And you know what? That had never happened before since the formation of the FCS. First season was 1978. The NFL draft in 79 was the first time for FCS players. There had never been consecutive years without an FCS quarterback taken. It's going to change this year, you would think. Mark Gronowski, the Walter Payton Award winner from South Dakota State. He's a two-time national champion, of course. He's probably going to change that. Can you tell us what translates to the next level with Mark Gronowski?
Well, I think his skill set is really pretty strong, Craig. He's got a lot of intangibles about him. First of all, the leadership ability. You saw what he did at the end of the season last year with South Dakota State, leading that football team into the playoffs and winning that national championship. I think he has the moxie of a leader, and that's really the most important thing when you look at a quarterback. How is he going to lead the football team? Secondly, his skill set. He can throw the ball exceptionally well. He can move a little bit. He's not the most gifted runner, but he can definitely make some yardage with his feet, which actually keeps the defense honest just a bit. But I think he's got a well-rounded game, and he's been very balanced back there. He gets the ball out of his hand pretty quickly. I think he's going to be someone who can shine in the NFL.
Offensive line, as we've seen, Gary, is like one of the leading positions that the NFL looks to the FCS level. This year, there's plenty. There's Charles Grant from William & Mary, Jackson Slater at Sacramento State, Hunter Zambrano in the Missouri Valley Conference, Illinois. There's plenty. Marcus Weir, we know so well from Montana State. Maybe for the FCS, it takes time for these offensive linemen to develop, to grow. Is that sort of what happens, that some of these linemen make it through for 4 years and then they are plucked up by the NFL level?
Yeah, you may have it just right, Craig. Is, offensive line and defensive linemen, they're typically bigger. And so younger men, 18, 19 years old, they're not fully grown yet. So you can't get them into college and think that they're going to play in the next year in the National Football League. That's just not going to happen. You need players that are going to physically develop and be able to withstand the rigors of the offensive and defensive line play. And I think that's what's happened over the last several years. When you look at the FCS and you think about offensive linemen, there's a better opportunity because they're going to stay in that program and they're probably going to play a fifth year. Most of them are going to redshirt. The ones are going to be more primed, and they're going to be physical. They're going to be strong, and they're capable players, and they may make a good translation to the NFL game.
Yeah. Trevor Penning was drafted first round out of UNI a few years back by the Saints. His younger brother, Jared, is a candidate at UNI this year. I mean, he's huge, 6'6", 335 pounds. So there are linemen everywhere. Cornerback, wide receiver, edge rushers, they always do well from the FCS level, getting drafted and just, getting an opportunity, even if they're signing as an undrafted free agent. I think one of our favorites this year might be David Walker, the edge rusher from Central Arkansas. He's a two-time Buck Buchanan Award finalist. How about his shot at the next level, Gary? What can you tell us about David?
Well, David might be just a little bit undersized on the outside there, but I think that David has a lot of skill set, and he's a player who can really turn the heat up in the backfield and pressuring quarterbacks. So I think that he's got an opportunity at the next level. One kind of a wild card here, I think, Craig, is you look at Montana's wide receiver and returner, Junior Bergen. He's a guy that kind of flipped it on late last year and really had a great end to his season. And he could be somebody who could step up and say, hey, look at me and see what I'm doing. And that may translate into the NFL very well.
Junior's return ability is enough to get him into the NFL. So he's tremendous. I mean, between Junior Berg and some of these offensive linemen, Mark Gronowski, we've seen them all on our Walter Payton Award watch list going into this season. And as we go to break, we are going to watch a video of all the Walter Payton Award watch list nominees. Welcome back to FCS Delivered, our second segment, Gary Reasons and I. And we are set to talk more of Gary's favorite topic, NFL. We're excited to talk about the NFL Draft FCS prospects with Emory Hunt of Football Game Plan, CBS HQ. He has his own draft guide. He's a broadcaster, an author, a speaker. Emory, welcome, and tell us, is there any title that you don't have?
I appreciate y'all bringing me on. But listen, I'm proud to announce that this past summer, I've been doing European League of Football games, so you could add international broadcaster too. But I'm just glad to be on the show. It's fun to do those games because it really challenges you to do something a little bit different.
Fantastic, Emory. Well, thank you again for joining us. Gary and I started talking about the NFL draft and FCS prospects in the first segment. One of the things we talked about is the transfer portal. Obviously, it's had an impact on the FCS level with NFL prospects, the FCS losing them a little earlier to the FBS. Tell us about that. Where does the FCS stand with the NFL today as opposed to 10 years ago?
It changed the landscape tremendously when you think about guys that we used to see come from the diamonds in the rough, right? A lot of those guys now after one season. So if you have a standout freshman season and you win the Jerry Rice Award, you might as well just jump in the portal and go somewhere else, right? So Gone is a true under the radar sleeper because that top tier FCS prospect 9 times out of 10 is transferring up, but there's still room for the FCS prospect because one of the things that I feel like FCS coaches do a fantastic job of is developing the talent. So they get these guys that may be an inch short, a tenth of a second slower than normal, or maybe not have blossomed yet as a prospect coming out of high school, and they are with these guys 4 to 5 years. So even though the top tier FCS guys transfer up in some cases, there's still a lot of talent at the FCS level, and you see it throughout the course of the draft process. These guys that trickle into these all-star games, you're like, man, this guy was at Holy Cross his whole career, or this guy was at Northwestern State his whole career, right? So I feel like there's still going to be those talented guys coming from the FCS ranks that still stay there throughout their whole career.
Emory, I'm glad you mentioned Northwestern State. That was a good plug. I appreciate that. hey, Craig and I, we were talking about Mark Gronowski, and really, he was our Walter Payton Award winner a year ago, quarterback of the national championship, South Dakota State football team. How do you see Mark Gronowski and how his game translates into the NFL, and maybe what might he need to do in development this season?
He does a lot of things that really translates in terms of how he manages a game, how he protects the possession. He's able to move the football down the field and keep the offense on pace. He could be trusted, I feel like, in the QB run game because he's a good athlete, and he makes those throws in the intermediate level of the field that you have to make at the pro level. Going into this season, you want to see how he can improve on his velocity going deeper down the field, being able to challenge those different quadrants of the field, as opposed to the short to intermediate passing game. And that's really where I feel like he has to make the most, growth moving forward. But in terms of what he does tangibly and intangibly as a player, he has more than enough to really drive an offense and drop in, even as your QB2 at the NFL level.
Yeah, I like his game quite a bit. Let's talk about the O-line, the big guys. They were always strong coming out of the FCS. So really, what linemen are you looking at this year as potential NFL draft picks?
There are 2 guys. There's Charles Grant of William & Mary, who's fantastic, 6'4", about 285. He could play. He's a guard, super athletic, really good technique. And the technique combined with the athleticism just helps escort guys up out the way. So he does a fantastic job consistently in that regard. And then you have Carson Vincent of Alabama A&M, another one of these guys that's super large. He's 6'6", 6'7", 285. Nice left tackle at Alabama A&M. We'll see if he can stay on the left side or has some right tackle capabilities. That's going to be for the All-Star game circuit. But you like that for a guy that tall. I think he has very good knee bend. So he's able to rake guys up out the hole and close off gaps and kick guys out and create that running lane for the running backs to really squirt through. So I feel like both of those guys are at the top of the list in terms of FCS prospects along the offensive line.
I love that you mentioned Carson Vincent. I mean, as the draft approaches and the All-Star games are going on, the combine, you seem to be everywhere. And then after you take all that in, watch all this film, you put out there who you like the best, who's impressed you the best. Sometimes it's a different take than others who are analyzing the draft. What do you look for when you're evaluating FCS prospects?
You want to see is to be honest, Craig, is no different than high school recruiting. When you pop in a recruit's, I'm sounding old, when you pop in a recruit's film, but when you put on the tape or whatnot, You want to see that guy stand out. You want to be able to immediately pick out, oh, that's the prospect. So if you're looking at the FCS guy, case in point, I'm out here in New Jersey, New York City area, and when I watched Dante Miller, who was at Columbia, before he transferred to South Carolina, when you watch the Columbia film, you're like, either my film is bad, because there's no way this guy is like 6 times faster than everybody on film, right? And so, but you realize he ran a 4.2, and that what you were watching was true. And so you want to see stuff like that. If I'm watching a Charles Grant, I want to see him dominate consistently, because that's what the NFL is going to say. Did you dominate your level of competition, no matter where you are, whether you're at the Power 5, Group of 5, FCS level? When we pop on the film, you better be able to dominate, and that's what I look for from these FCS prospects. Then you look at, okay, if he fits in, and this is why the All-Star game is important, because you may get a guy that doesn't dominate on film, but he's at an All-Star game, and you're seeing his traits that are translatable or transferable. So when I'm at, like, let's say a Giants training camp, right, and I'm constantly looking at NFL athleticism, and even though this guy statistically may not have dominated, he may have been a number 3 receiver at Houston Christian, but here in the All-Star game, he's showing the twitch, he's showing the quickness, he's showing the acceleration, he has good body type, and you're like, okay, he could actually get on a 90-man roster and compete. So you have to factor all of those things in. But immediately it's like, did he dominate on tape? And then if I had the luxury of seeing him at an All-Star game, does he physically fit the mold of what the NFL likes? And you start from there, and then you work yourself outside to everyone else.
Emory, when we take a look at this NFL draft class potentially for the FCS, first, how do you grade that? And secondly, where can we find your coverage?
Listen, I love the FCS. I'm a big proponent of guys. I tell people it doesn't matter, stop helmet scouting. There's talent everywhere. And the world is bigger than the Power 4. So that's how I go about, scouting. And the FCS talent this year is really good from top to bottom. Even when you talk about some of these Ivy League prospects, I feel like this is a good group of quarterbacks in the Ivy League this year. And we've seen a lot of Ivy League guys transfer from the Ivy League and go to Power 5s or Group of 5s or whatever and get drafted. So, I feel like this is a good class for the FCS prospects. And people can follow my work at footballgameplan.com/2025 draft guide. I'll put the link out there, but at FBallGamePlan on Twitter.
All right.
Well, Emory, I think all anybody has to do is just do an internet search for Zara the Playbook, and Emory Hunt's going to pop up. Gary and I really appreciate your time, your insight. We look forward to watching all your evaluations of FCS and NFL draft prospects moving forward. We thank you for joining us. We will be back with our final segment of FCS Delivered. Welcome back to FCS Delivered, our third and final segment. Gary Reasons and I have been talking NFL draft. We had a special guest, Emory Hunt, in the last segment. Gary, we're getting close to the season. As you know, we've been going conference by conference with previews on TheAnalyst.com. It all sets up to August 24th. That is week 0. Now, there are only 5 games involving FCS teams as they kick off that early week. But there's some good ones. Montana State is at New Mexico. That is certainly an FCS potential upset of the FBS. We look at the MEAC SWAC Challenge, Norfolk State against Florida A&M down in Atlanta. It's coming fast, Gary. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I think the teams are getting ready. It's hot out there. They want to play. They want to start hitting somebody else instead of each other. So I'm looking forward to the kickoff of the FCS football season.
And then the full slate comes up the following week. Begins on a Thursday night, week 1. In week 1, we actually bring in a couple new programs to the FCS level up from Division 2. West Georgia, they're going to be in the United Athletic Conference. They're hosting Sanford. Great matchup to get going there. Mercyhurst is now in the Northeast Conference. They're playing a non-FCS opponent to get started, but that'll bring this year's total to 129 programs. So we're looking forward to that. Now, Gary, in recent weeks, we've been talking about the watch list, and we talked a little bit of players on the Walter Payton and Buck Buchanan or watch list with NFL draft candidates. The Eddie Robinson Award, 38th season for the FCS Coach of the Year that you hand out at the FCS National Awards Banquet. We don't do a watch list because we let the season play out before we had the finals. But Gary, last year you correctly picked Jimmy Rogers of South Dakota State in the preseason that he'd go on to win the Eddie Robinson Award, which he did with a 15-0 national champion at South Dakota State. When you're pondering candidates going into the season, what do you look for a potential Eddie Robinson Award winner?
Well, Craig, I look at the Eddie Robinson Award really, and it comes down to one word: leadership. And leadership is the most paramount thing that a head football coach at the FCS level, or really any level, has to bring to the forefront for his football team to be successful. And leadership means a whole lot of stuff, but it encompasses putting a structure into place so that your team and your players can succeed on the field. And that is really what is at the heart of most successful coaches. They are great leaders. They're great people. They understand how to communicate to players. And really, it takes over the course of time, throughout a season, those teams, those coaches, the players, the environment, the universities are all going to experience different challenges. And how does that coach keep that team together through leadership to be able to get the results that they're looking for? They're looking for W's. They're looking for conference wins. They're looking for potential bids in the FCS playoffs. So that's what I look for. I look for a coach who has led his team remarkably and overcome some obstacles or adversity along the way, because that is really the telling tale of what a coach can do to make his team more successful.
Yeah, I think in Jimmy Rogers' case last year, they had a phenomenally tough schedule, playing in the Missouri Valley Conference, and they just kept winning. They had one of the best defenses of all time. So even though they were the number one team going into the nation, they really impressed with what they did throughout their schedule. But, sometimes that happens. Sometimes a coach of a team that might be coming off, say, a 3-8 year, like Bob Nielsen at South Dakota last year, suddenly he had them right there in the mix nationally. I think that those are also kind of coaches that people think of for Eddie Robinson Award candidates. So I think there's so many different ways to look at this when you're judging who's been the best. But leadership, I think you're right. I thought Bobby Houck last year, really did a great job with Montana. I think he's got a shot to maybe win it this year. I like Todd Whitten down at Tarleton State. I think they're going to be in more of a focus now that they're playoff eligible. And that would be somebody who's coming, who's not well known, that will suddenly just be in the national picture with Eddie Robinson Award winners. Gary, I tell you, this season has really come up quickly. We have one more episode before all the games get started. Whew, I tell you, it's just incredible how much excitement we have for the FCS level.
Well, I think it's going to be a great start to the season. We're going to have some very, very notable matchups early on preseason. FCS against FBS. I look forward to those matchups, trying to see how those are going to unfold. And really, it's going to start to another great season. We're going to go on campus again this season. I'll be out on the road presenting a National Player of the Week award or Team of the Week award on campus. And I don't know where I'm going yet, Craig, but we'll figure it out as the games unfold.
Terrific. Well, next week on FCS Delivered, we'll take a look at the conference races and maybe make some conference and seasonal picks. You nailed it last year with Jimmy Rogers. We'll see if you can do it with some of the conference races. Gary, thank you again for another great week of FCS Delivered. We thank our listeners and viewers. We'll be back next week with another episode of FCS Delivered.